Hello, my name is Jessie Morrow, and I work in visitor services. I am the virtual tour specialist. And today I'm here to give you a little taste of what these virtual tours look like. Now, these are civic-based tours that I give to fourth and fifth graders primarily, so the information might be a little basic, but maybe it'll be a good recap and maybe you'll learn something new. That would be pretty cool. So let me share my screen. There we go. And so here we are, we've got a little bit of our Capitol campus, and we're going to spend most of our time here in the legislative building. So just a really quick look at the rotunda. The rotunda is the center, the heart of the legislative building. And I like to think about it like our unspoken fourth branch, if you will, because this space is really dedicated to the people, which is who our government is meant to serve. And so we are representing all of our Washingtonians in here with the 39 county flags surrounding this area. Over here we have Thurston County, where we are now. So there's our flag there. All right, now let's really jump into those three branches, starting with the legislative branch. So here we are in the chambers of the House of Representatives, which of course is half of our legislative branch. So we have 98 representatives in here. That is 2 representatives who are chosen, voted on to represent each of those 49 districts here in Washington State. And so these folks are our lawmakers. That's what happens in the legislative branch. Laws are made. And so what happens is if somebody like me has a really cool idea for a law, I can talk to my legislators. So could be my representatives, could be my senator, and tell them my idea. And if they really like this idea that I have, then they will draft a bill. So now it's my idea, but with all the fancy technical language, and it can be read on the floor for the rest of the representatives to hear. After it's read on the floor, it will leave this space, go over to committees, the committee hearing rooms for public hearings first, where the public and anybody can say how they feel about the bill, if they like it, if they don't, maybe they have some suggested changes that they want to put in there. And then they'll stay over there for the executive sessions. And in those, they will potentially make some of those changes, right, that were suggested. And then once they have it just how they want it, they'll send it off to the Rules Committee, and then the Rules Committee will decide if and when it comes back onto the floor to be voted on. How does that work in here? Well, our representatives vote electronically. So the 3 panels up here will turn on. In the center, we'll have the title of the bill, a little description so everybody knows what they're voting on. And on the sides will be the names of all 98 representatives, and they will be white. But when they vote, they've got these little devices on their desks that they will vote with. When they push their buttons, their names will change color. So if they push their yes button, their name's going to turn green. If they push their no button, it'll turn red. And if they are excused, they'll have a blue name. But what we need is a little more than half of them to say yes for the bill to pass. So that would be at least 50 people in here. And so if that happens, it passes, and say it started in here, that means it's going to have to go to the Senate and do that same process all over again. So let's look at the Senate now. All right, here we are in the Senate, really similar space, right? These folks are doing the same work, but there are some differences. One of the main ones being a lot fewer of them, right? So we've got half as many people in here, 1 senator for each of our 49 districts. So 49 senators total. And they are going to get that bill that passed out of the House, it's going to come over here and do the same process. It'll be read on the floor. It'll go to the committees. Maybe there'll be some changes. And then it'll go to the Rules Committee and come back here. But they are going to vote a little bit differently. The Senate is a more traditional body, and they like to do things the old-fashioned way. So instead, when it's time to vote in here, the lieutenant governor, who's in charge in here, will introduce the bill, and then the secretary is going to call out each senator alphabetically, and they will vote by roll call. So they'll either say aye or no to make their vote. And so you have to listen kind of carefully for your senator instead of seeing a screen change in front of your eyes. But everybody votes. It takes a little bit longer. And we still need that simple majority, a little bit more than half, to pass the bill. And so let's say that it passes in here as well. There's one more place that that bill has to go, and that is the governor's office. So when the governor gets the bill on his desk, he's got 4 different things he can do. The first thing is he can sign it. Second thing he can do is veto the whole thing. Third thing is he can line veto, which means he can take just a chunk of it out that he doesn't like. And then the fourth thing he can do is he can leave that bill on his desk unsigned. If it stays there for 5 days during session, it will become a law without his signature. But that's only happened like once in the last 40 years, so it's not very common. So that is how we pass a bill and make it a law here in Washington State. But that is, of course, not the only job of the governor signing bills. The governor does some other things too. So now we've moved out of the legislative branch and into the executive branch. That's our branch, right? So the governor is the head of the executive branch. And one of the things he does as that head is he appoints heads of agencies to help him carry out the laws, because that is what the executive branch does, carries out the laws. We start to see them work. So he does that. He also represents the state of Washington. He's really our figurehead. Whenever he might meet with dignitaries and other important people, and he's representing all of us here in Washington. And he also can declare states of emergency and call in the National Guard if that is necessary. Like he had the state of emergency for COVID, right? But it could also be natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis and things like that. So those are some of the things that our governor does. All right, so that was really brief talk about the executive branch, but I do want to leave that building, the legislative building, for a minute and check out the Temple of Justice and our judicial branch. So our judicial branch is made up of our court system. We've got 4 different tiers to our court system. The bottom 2 are trial courts, where those initial decisions are made about whether or not someone is guilty of a crime. And then the top 2 tiers are appellate courts. And this is really the court of last resort is what we call it, the Washington State Supreme Court. So if you go to appeal a case, first you'll go to the Court of Appeals. And if they still say that you're guilty and you think it's not fair for some reason, you want to take your case here, you can try to do that. But our 9 justices don't have time to see all of the cases that come to them. So they do get to choose which ones they hear, and they will choose based on a few questions they'll ask themselves. For instance, they'll ask, was justice served in this case? Was the law clear in this case? Because the judicial branch is where they're interpreting laws. And they'll also ask, who is affected by the case? Is it something that's important to a lot of Washingtonians? And so those are the sort of cases that they will hear in this space. And so when someone is making their case, each side has 20 minutes to make their case to the 9 justices. And then after that, the 9 justices will go back into this door and they'll start deliberating. And deliberations can take a long time. They're really going to take their time and make the best decision that they can because they know how important those decisions are. Because even if they disagree, we've got an odd number of them, so we'll never have a tie, but they will write down how they make those decisions and they will sign it, and those are made public. They're also in these books over here, and they are called opinions. And they know that these are very important because they set a precedence for the future. So if another case comes through that is maybe similar in nature, someone could turn to that case that was already brought here and say, well, this is the ruling that happened in that case, so I should get this ruling as well. So those things are very important. Not exactly law, but definitely sets a precedent. All right, so there's a brief look at our judicial branch in our Washington State Supreme Court. So now we've looked at our 3 branches, our legislative making the laws, our executive carrying out the laws, and our judicial interpreting the laws. And then the last thing I want to show you has nothing to do with the 3 branches necessarily, but it is a very pretty view. And that is the view from the dome. This is just a very special view that we got special permission to have a drone fly up here and get this shot. So you can see the city of Olympia and the bottom of the Puget Sound. Mount Rainier was behind some clouds over here, and everything else, this gorgeous view here. So I want to thank you for joining me on this abbreviated tour. And like I said, I hope you learned something. And hopefully, if you don't make your way into this building often, this will inspire you and you can come see where all the work is happening, all the stuff that you aren't directly involved with. But thank you so much for joining me today.